My name's Zio, and as you know, we like to talk about RPGs on this channel. If you're watching this, you're probably a fan of Final Fantasy, or at least know of it. For many of us, myself included, that was the JRPG gateway drug that led to the discovery of other franchises like Phantasy Star. So what the is Romancing SaGa? This is part of the long-running Saga franchise that made its debut on the Game Boy in 1989. We here in the West know the first three Saga games as Final Fantasy Legend. Square wanted to push this franchise as its next big thing in the wake of Final Fantasy's success. Romancing SaGa was a trilogy of games released on the Super Famicom starting in 1992. I say Super Famicom as opposed to Super Nintendo because none of these games were localized outside Japan. RPGs hadn't quite hit their mark in the West, and localizing one of these games was still a huge gamble. These games are known for their non-linear open worlds and challenging battles. Unlike other RPGs, characters don't level up by experience points. Their individual attributes go up as they win battles. They also became more proficient with weapons and magic as they used them. In Romancing SaGa, you start the game by choosing one of 8 main protagonists. They each have their own opening scenario, but the core narrative remains the same. 1,000 years before the start of the game, a war broke out in the world of Mardias between the benevolent god Elor and the 3 evil gods, Death, Shirok, and Sarwyn. Death and Shirok were stripped of their powers, and Sarwyn was sealed up with the help of 10 Fate Stones and the sacrifice of the hero Mirsa. The original Super Famicom version sold over 1 million copies in Japan and was pretty well received. The game received a remake in 2005 called Minstrel Song on the PlayStation 2, and this version actually did make it overseas. This version was pretty well received in Japan, but got mixed reviews overseas. The remake received a remaster in 2022 on modern consoles as well as Steam. Romancing SaGa 2 was released in December of 1993 and introduced the Glimmer mechanic, which would become a hallmark of the franchise going forward. The story centers around a group of warriors dubbed the Seven Heroes who saved the world from monster attacks and then mysteriously vanished. 1,000 years later, monsters start showing up again, but this time the heroes come back as the villains. You play as the ruler of the Varanus Empire with the task of defeating these fallen heroes over the course of multiple generations. You expand your empire by completing quests in different regions, and every so often there's a time skip where you'll be asked to pick a new emperor. The new emperor, or empress, inherits everything from previous generations thanks to inheritance magic. The game was remastered and brought to iOS and Android in 2016. This was also the game's first official localization outside Japan. The game was ported to PS4, PS Vita, Xbox One, Switch, and Steam in late 2017. The game got a full 3D remake in 2024 with voice acting and an overhauled combat system. This was the best-selling game in the trilogy back in the day, moving over 1.5 million units. Rounding out the trilogy, we have Romancing SaGa 3, which released on November 11th of 1995. You start the game by picking one of 8 characters, but this time around they all know each other. Every 300 years, there's an event called the Rise of the Marastrum, which is accompanied by a solar eclipse. During this event, every baby born that year dies except for one. One kid grew up to be an evil ruler called the Archfiend, and then 300 years later, another kid grew up to be a hero called the Matriarch. The story picks up 16 years after the most recent eclipse, with no one knowing the fate of the most recent child of destiny. There's growing tension as to whether this child will be righteous or evil. The game makes use of the same progression system as its predecessors. It did really well in Japan, selling over 1.3 million copies. In November 2019, this game received a full-blown HD remaster. This was when it finally received an official translation after 24 years. Fun fact, this was actually the first game that I streamed on Twitch when I first began this crazy content creation journey. Of course, hardly anyone watched. My audio and everything were super scuffed. That was a few months before I started playing Phantasy Star again. That was back when I had the Zio RPG name. I'm Zio and I play RPGs. Still hard to believe that we're coming up on 5 years here. It almost doesn't seem possible. Crazy to think how far we've come since then. So that was a brief overview of Romancing SaGa with the arrival of Romancing SaGa 2, Revenge of the Seven. I know some folks might not like these games because they're turn-based and non-linear, and that's okay. Trying to figure out what you're supposed to do next can also get pretty frustrating. I like the gameplay and the art style, as well as the music for these games. Kenji Ito has put out some bangers over the years. So what do you think? Are you planning to pick up Romancing SaGa 2, Revenge of the Seven? There's a free demo out, so you can try that and see if it's your thing before you plunk down the money. Anyway, that's a wrap. I hope you have a blessed day. And remember, to thine own self be true. Until next time, farewell.